philo-Semitic means you like Jews, anti-Semitic means you don't like Jews. So, because the Harvard Museum, Semitic Museum, dealt with other issues anyway, and didn't want that confusion, they renamed it Harvard Museum of Ancient Near East History. But that's where they got this replica, full-size replica, but open, of a first-century home. And you see the loft, and that in the Greek word is the inn where there was no room for Jesus. It's a very different word than the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan brings the guy to an inn. Very different word. It's the loft. There was no room in the loft. So they had him down on the first floor where they'd often bring animals in. Hence the manger. So, Harvard Museum, you can go online and see that picture. Harvard Museum of Ancient Near East History. I can't wait to see it. I'll get back there someday. Harvard Museum of Ancient Near East History. But they now have this, you know, here it is, and you can see why they would have a manger on the first floor, is they bring their animals in. But there was no room up in the loft where you normally were, and so Mary would have had help from half the people there, which would have been women. This was no, you don't turn around and turn out a 7-month pregnant woman in the Near East today or back then. They're very hospitable people, the Jews and the Arabs. Okay? She's about to have a baby. You don't say there's no room in Motel 6, get lost. That's not how that part of the world works. That's modern America, maybe. And even then, I don't know. But it's simply, you know, the manger was important because now they wrapped up Jesus and put him in there. And then the shepherds came and they knew what they were looking at because that's what they do with their sacrificial lambs. They would keep the lambs from sacrifice in that part of the country. They had to make sure those lambs didn't get hurt. I've read that they wrap them up wrap them up in a shroud. Well, wrap them up, put them in the mangers we got from then, those days were limestone. Now they might have had them of wood. Wood wouldn't survive 2,000 years. But anyway, this holiday, the Bible doesn't say a lot about it. The Jews have turned it in to a new year. It is the liturgical new year. Actually, I've got, okay, Friday, September 15th is Elul 29, 5783. See, they'll trace the world's creation back almost 6,000 years. Sound a little like Him. I like, by the way. Saturday, September 16th, today, 2023. Remember, of course, things begin on the night before. Is Tishri the first, 5784. So if you get a Hebrew calendar, you can get those. You know, they've actually got the. I mean, even though modern Israel, everyone goes by their regular things, our dates, you can still get calendars that show the Jewish holidays and the dates and everything. Today is Tishri the first, 5784. It's Happy New Year, according to something that's not even in the Bible, was simply added later on. And when you get into Judaism, I got those books at home, the first Jewish book of why, and the Jewish book of why, and the second Jewish book of why by Alfred Colpatch, I think it is. Why they do all these things is all this added tradition. So again, you look stuff at, here's the Bible, here's the first centuries of trying to figure out even when Pentecost should be. And now here's modern Judaism with a whole lot more added to it, over, even after the Second Temple was destroyed. Because they had to make Judaism without sacrifices, without a temple, in exportable Judaism to Jews all over the world. And that's why they wrote the Talmud. Question?
You think, like the postal holidays?
Postal?
The postal holidays.
The Hallmark holidays?
In America.
Yeah.
And they keep adding one every 5 years. Is it sort of like with a feast? They like to celebrate, so we get some more Sabbaths and some more days off.
We do it for political reasons. Washington's birthday and Lincoln's birthday are now what? President's Day and MLK Day. And as far as adding to them, yeah, it's like all these events happen and they'll either add or at least rename stuff. it's kind of like, yeah, we follow our modern political whims, okay? In my day, again, Washington's birthday and Lincoln's birthday have disappeared, have been replaced with other names. And, yeah, every major city's got their MLK Street or Ave or something like that, the big cities. I think Judaism has kind of done the same. That it has changed. The bar mitzvah, they don't go back that far, even. And those are just coming of age ceremonies that they probably got from pagans or Christians or whatever.
So to clarify, is it the Feast of Trumpets or is it the New Year we're celebrating? Is it both?
It's both. In the Bible, it's the Feast of Trumpets. Nothing about a New Year. That was added later. To Jews today, it's the New Year. After the destruction of the Second Temple, that sort of took precedence. In other words, it's a new year. We're not sacrificing animals. Yeah, they do blow the trumpets, the shofar in the temple and stuff like that. But it's more of a new year. And it starts the 10 days of awe. It starts a solemn season. When I lived in Marblehead, Massachusetts, Jews would not go to school on Yom Kippur. That day you skip. When I moved to Swampscott, the next town over, the Jewish population was so high. I think my 5th grade picture, and I moved during the 5th grade. 5th grade picture, the only 2 of us I recognize as not being Jewish in that picture. They just shut the schools down. You didn't have enough people to show up to have class. Okay, these are heavy. These towns like Newton, Massachusetts, Marblehead, Swampscott, you're dealing with Newton, Wellesley area, probably way over half of them probably Jewish. At least they were. Okay, these are communities. In Hebrew school, they told us it was a ghetto. Now that isn't true. That an American guy told me in Israel. That's not true, but they said it's a ghetto. Actually, when I was a kid, you couldn't buy land in the Marblehead Neck, the rich area. They wouldn't sell to blacks or Jews. They just wouldn't sell you the house. Now that's no longer legal, but it was back then. You couldn't join the Tedesco Country Club Golf Club in Swampscott if you were Jewish, and if you caddied there, my father said, if you caddy there, don't tell them you're Jewish. That's no longer legal. They asked my parents to join, but they ended up joining the Kernwood in Salem, which is probably just about all Jewish. Jewish Community Center High is non-Jews. I mean, a lot of that stuff is no longer legal, but it is a very heavy Jewish population in places in New York and Massachusetts, where you get a town my town might have been 1/3 Jewish, but I get a feeling it was more like a half. I figure 1/3 Jewish, 1/3 Protestant, 1/3 Catholic by what we had in school. But looking at my 5th grade picture, it might have been way over half Jewish. I don't know. Looking at the names, because we just had a class reunion that I had to miss. I didn't want to, but I did. Yeah, maybe half of us, something like that. A lot of these towns, Newton, Wellesley, again, those places, probably the vast majority of Jewish, or at least were. What you've got now is, because the laws have changed, you got more of a moving around, people of color and stuff, like in Swampscott. There's no black kids. When I was a kid, Swampscott, one kid in the high school that was not white, and he was Chinese. His father owned the Chinese restaurants. And a lot of this was actually set by law. They just wouldn't, not by law, but by stuff that was not illegal at the time. We don't sell to Jews. That wasn't the law, but they wouldn't do it. Okay? And so now there's more maybe of a mixture in some of these communities. But that's the way it was, Yom Kippur. Because that was solemn, and you had a fast. You can't eat on Yom Kippur. In fact, you go out and you take bread and throw it in the ocean. You're throwing your crumbs away. I remember doing that in a plastic bag with my father coming back from the synagogue. But that's the day, you buy tickets to the synagogue, and I think you get better seats if you pay more. It's all that stuff. It's kind of weird. Because usually Jewish holidays aren't like that. But, But yeah, it's the Feast of Trumpets in the Bible. It's the New Year in modern Jewish liturgy, where there are trumpets, but it's not the emphasis. The emphasis is in the New Year. And on the start of this 10-day days of Oz, which end with Yom Kippur, when God's going to decide what's going to happen to you in the next year. Okay? It is a solemn time. The 10 days of Oz, which just probably went over my head when I was a kid, didn't even hear of them. But Rosh Hashanah, as we call it, Yom Kippur, Yom Kippur as we used to call it, you knew when those days were.
So to end the argument,
Yeah.
just celebrate both of them.
Yeah, well, depends what you want to do. When I read these, though, no, well, yeah, we do. When I read these, okay, in the Bible it's trumpets. So if you want to try to go by prophecy, prophetic argument, is it the last trump? At least it's in the Bible. The New Year's bit isn't in the Bible at all. That was just added later.
So when did they start the new year being then?
Today. When did they? It mentions here at least the 2nd century. One of those books. It was at least, actually, let me look at it. Trumpets.
You want to keep up with all the Jewish holidays? There's an app called Simple Luach. Simple Luach. And this is what it looks like. And it shows today is Tishri 1, 5784.
Yeah.
What's it called again?
Simple,
Like simple, like.
Simple
Mhm.
Luach. You download it on your phone, you get all the information. It shows it all. This is today, and then here's the calendar, and it shows both Jewish calendar and our calendar.
Yeah.
And then you can look at holidays, and it lists all the dates of all the holidays. You got Rosh Hashanah, fast of Gedalia.
Gedalia, yeah.
What's that?
You know Gedalia in the Bible, after Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians, there was a governor put in charge called Gedalia who was eventually murdered. Okay, that's right in the Bible.
So we have fast of Gedalia, Yom Kippur, Sukkot.
Yeah, they add so much. Yeah, here it mentions at least the 2nd century AD as far as Rosh Hashanah.
So it lists all that stuff. You can get all.
Yeah,
keep
there's
up
all
with
these.
all of it.
There's a bunch more. But as I put this together, as I've been reading this, and this has taken months to go through and to reread and read, certain parts of it to understand, because it gets confusing. The Pharisees say this, the Sadducees say this, and so here's what we do. And it dawned on me, if you're going to have a liturgical year, yeah, Christmas is cool, at least in that you can celebrate that Christ was born. I mean, that's, when he was born, you can argue about. And certainly Easter, although I don't like bunnies and eggs, I mean, at least you know when the resurrection is, a few days after Passover. So some of that makes sense. Most of it, when I was going through catechism in Russian Orthodox Church, it's either feast or famine. Orthodox is either feast or fast. They get feast and fast and feast. All these saints, you don't even know if they existed. I don't know if they make them up. No, they go by all these traditions. A lot of what we believe is tradition.
Yeah.
Saint Anne. Okay, Saint Anne is a couple of miles from here. Well, was her name really Anne? I don't think it's not in the Bible. They got all these traditions, and the Russian Orthodox they'll have like icons of Tsar Nicholas II. Well, that guy hated the Jews, so I'm not too fond about him. But they'll take all these traditions, and to them it's as important as anything. The Bible is one of those traditions. But you got all these feasts and fasts. At least something like this. Catholics don't go down that road too far. At least this is based on Bible. It's Old Testament. We don't have to keep it. The Bible doesn't say keep it. The Bible says doesn't forbid it. It doesn't mandate that we keep these ancient feasts, and it doesn't forbid it either. But at least it ties you in with the Bible and a whole lot of typology. Christ our Passover sacrifice for us, and getting out the old leaven and all that stuff. I mean, that's got biblical precedence. So it makes at least more sense if you can have a liturgical year, have it match this a little bit. But yeah, again, the Jews, because after the second temple, they a whole lot of this, which I didn't read, of course, was sacrifices you do on certain days. And the Jews had to develop a religion after the destruction of the second temple that didn't include sacrifices or even a temple. Okay? And that's an issue that's come up even in the 20th century. Why do they call it a temple instead of a synagogue? To show that here's our temple, not in Jerusalem, we're loyal to you, the United States, or whatever country we're in. That's why they call it a synagogue, a temple. They started calling it a temple to show loyalties to their nations, because all these countries thought, oh, they're loyal to Israel, whatever, Palestine, they're not loyal to us. But so these things keep coming up. But yeah, it ties you in. But the Jews have added so much that it clouds the issue sometimes. The Feast of Gedalia is one, and there are others. There are a bunch. There are holidays. There are a few added holidays. Simchat Torah was another added one. There are a few. But even then, if you want to at least realize it's the 5 books of Moses, which is kind of important. Yeah, Jesus quoted Deuteronomy when he was tempted of the devil. We don't even know what to do with Deuteronomy sometimes. You get through the other books, and Deuteronomy actually comes from a different angle. It's not God saying, "Thus saith the Lord." It's Moses talking. It's not that it's wrong, but you notice some of the differences. Notice some of the differences. Moses comes at some events, even the commandments, not to covet. You read it carefully. Moses is coming from a different angle. It's not, don't covet your neighbor's house, his wife, and all the other junk in the house. It's don't covet your neighbor's wife or the house and all the junk. Read how he deals with stuff like, when they were going north trying to get to the promised land, God says, don't bother the Edomites, don't bother the Moabites, don't bother the Ammonites, that's their land. And, Sihon and Og, the Amorite kings that he had to conquer. You read what happened in the Bible, and you read how Moses handles it very carefully. He says to them, about, maybe it was Joshua or something, but no, it comes out actually in Judges. But, about offering water and stuff like that, which you end up, you put the two together, you get an idea of what it's like. It's like Catch-22. War is war, but business is business. That's from Any Which Way You Can. But it's like Catch-22. Because you have to get both of them to figure out how come one book says they wouldn't give us any water, and the other book says they gave us water and food and stuff like that. Because obviously the king said no, and the military said no, and then you get the businessmen sneaking through the lines. Welcome to modern warfare. But no, I'm serious. It's Moses saying this is what's going on, and he's a little mellowed out, something like that. And it's not that it's wrong. It's like, why do you need 4 gospels instead of 1 super gospel? Because they're written to 4 different people, 4 different mindsets, 4 different emphases. So you need them all. 1 super gospel wouldn't give them to you. But yeah, that's a good question. These days it's the New Year is what Jews emphasize, but they do blow their shofar. Obviously they're not sacrificing anything. In the old days before the destruction of the Second Temple, it was more of the trumpets. This New Year thing didn't come till later. And yeah, there are a few extra feasts. Fast, whatever.
You're talking about how you had to sell tickets for the synagogue. Christians, we have the same thing. We have CEOs, Christmas and Easter only.
Well, a lot of Jews, they'll go on Yom Kippur, okay, and probably their son's bar mitzvah, all those things. What's the other one? Hanukkah? Yeah, Hanukkah and Passover, but especially the synagogue, that's the big one. And you have to buy a seat. The seats will be full, pretty much. And I guess no matter what you think, you don't wanna mess with God on the day when he's gonna decide
Yeah.
what's gonna happen over the next year.
Getting pretty serious.
Okay. You know, it's like we've had our fun, let's go to church now. Maybe the same mindset. But I remember those days, my father we'd go from one synagogue to another. We go to my great grandmother's on my mother's side, and that's what's Orthodox. You had men on one side, women on the other. And then we, go to ours, maybe in, I forget what the order was. And, I mean, we were dressed up in those days. I mean, those were the days when, you come out of church with those white bonnets and everything. Everyone was dressed up for religious reasons. These days they go to mass in my hometown and maybe jeans and a t-shirt. Roseburg, Oregon, the two most populated churches, the preacher would preach in shorts and sandals. I wouldn't wear that to church. I don't even wear sandals unless I'm in my home, but that's me. But it's just, but shorts and sandals, and the two, biggest churches I think they were in Roseburg. I don't know of any bigger ones, but it's those days. I just remember the dressing up and the whole bit, and it was very serious. I mean, we took those days seriously, and you did not eat. You fasted. In Israel, when I was at Kibbutz Givatos in 1975, and we had the Yom Kippur, they said you can. Now Israelis, modern Israelis, are very secular, although 25% of them are now religious because of their high birth rate. And they said you can fast if you want. If you're going to fast, here's a big meal to have the night before, because Israel lunch is the big meal. Sabbath, it's Friday night, that's their biggest meal. But on the other 6 days, have a breakfast, big lunch, and then smaller supper, which, by the way, Europeans, anywhere I've been in Europe, is what they do too. But they said if you're going to fast, you get a big supper, but if you're not going to fast, the ones fasting on the work study group, a lot of people were Gentile. It was the Gentiles fasting. Out of respect for the Jews. The Jews didn't fast as much. And that's, But actually, I've heard that the Jews in Israel are not as religious as the Jews in America. And that might have changed. And I mentioned that to a Catholic friend of mine, and she said, well, she's from Italy, her ancestry is Italian. She said, the Catholics in Italy are not as observant as the Catholics in America. I guess when you're out of the country, out of your place of origin, or religiously even, you're more observant. Now that might not be as true now, but that's the way it was back then. It's like, I remember some Gentiles are fasting, and here I am Jewish, and I'm not fasting, and other Jews seem to be eating. But anyway. That's the way it is.
Well, I'm okay with wearing sandals to church.
I'm not criticizing.
I would never wear suspenders,
I know. You don't want to see the result if I don't. Big hair, small hair. I had to get the warden's permission to wear suspenders on my uniform. I see my correctional officer uniform. But actually, I'm losing weight. You know what I did? I stopped eating Cokes all the time and sugars. And I realized there's some sugar in bread and even ketchup and stuff. I lost like 17 pounds. I weighed myself this morning. I'm probably 202. I started out 220. And I'll tell you, sugar's insidious. It makes you crave more. It makes you crave more. I mean, I was having sugar problems. You go to the doctor, and hey, you're pre-diabetic. Well, wait a minute. So, yeah, and part of it's just eating less, but especially avoiding. And I backslid a little. We had a trip for nearly 2 weeks, and you're out on the road, and I could have avoided that, but you're hot, and you pull up at a gas station, there's nothing like, soda. But still, I'll tell you, when I'll get skinny enough, and I just bought a bunch of dress clothes, some of which are already too big for me. Some of them I haven't even worn yet, and they're too big. But when I can wear clothes again where I don't need suspenders, because when I was thin enough, I didn't need them. But that's because I'm big hair, so I need big pants, and I'm small hair, so they don't hold up. I know they call me suspenders. I've been called, the inmates have called me that. Suspenders, Papa. No, Papa, that's one of the correctional officers. Old man, Old school, even one of the workers. You get all these handles there, but yeah, suspenders. The only one who wears suspenders
Urkel,
here.
I'm surprised.
Huh?
Nobody's called you Urkel? After
Oh.
Steve Urkel, he used to wear suspenders.
No.
Okay.
No, but those guys probably never watched it. They're probably not old enough to have it. At least those inmates, or wouldn't have.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't get that one. I've been called a lot of things.
Okay.
Triple OG, which is old gangster. Triple OG white chocolate. White chocolate, I found out it's a black that acts like a white, I guess. But white chocolate, one of the nurses said, do you know why he calls you white chocolate? And this inmate was a friend of the nurse. I said, no. She says, because I get a goat white chocolate. So this inmate knew it, and he was calling me Triple OG white chocolate. He was, you develop some interesting You're not supposed to get really friendly with the inmates, but some of them, you know, when you talk to them and everything, it gets interesting. Some of the guys, I work at the annex now as a counselor, these are the low security guys. They seem like a bunch of nice guys, so you look up what got them in there. Wow. You know, I figure, hey, too bad you can't just take them home, feed them a good meal for a night or something like that. Which you can, of course you can't. Some guy gave them some sodas when they were working outside, and he got fired.
Aw.
Oh, yeah, that is strict. They're strict on us. Lost 8 people over one inmate beating. And it wasn't even because the paperwork wasn't done. 8 people got fired. And the inmate started it.
Wow.
They're very strict. And that's why our warden got Warden of the Year. January 2022, for the North American, some there were other prisons, it might have included Canada for all I know. But very strict. No, I asked the warden, can I wear suspenders? He had to make a phone call and ask. He couldn't make that decision. It's all from Nashville. TDOC, Tennessee Department of Correction Policy. Orders come from Nashville, that's it. Just orders come from Memphis, that's where the gangs are headquartered. Someone's gonna get shanked. Which means knifed.
Yeah.
Or something. If orders comes from Memphis, someone's gonna get hurt bad. Like someone stepping down from a gang or something like that, but. Yeah. Judaism's interesting because it is so much custom. Yeah, it's kind of an Old Testament side to it, but who's sacrificing? Where's the temple? And I get on Zoom meetings, which I'm probably not supposed to mention, but I'm sure the Israeli government knows about them. One of the guys doing it got caught with me years ago. They knew we were preaching. Someone in the prayer meeting turned us in. Prayer meeting in America of all things. Word found their way to Israel. But I get in these Zoom meetings sometimes on Monday, and they're so, you know, one part Hebrew Christian woman and a Christian husband, and they're living in Israel now, but that's not where they're from. And they get so excited over all this idea of building a temple and stuff like that. And there's a lot going on over there politically, by the way. And what's happening is the religious proportion is getting higher because they have the religious Jews have a high birth rate. When they get into they get seats in the Knesset, you know, 120 seats in their parliament, they call it Knesset. And they get more power, and they're trying to turn it into a religious, you know, basically a rabbinocracy. And it really, you know, a lot of the Jews aren't like that. They like to go to the beach on Saturdays and stuff like that. But what you have is more and more danger, terrorism. They now got missiles. They don't even have to get into the country. They just launch missiles from outside the country. You know, I remember being in Jenin when I was a kid. No, I was a kid. My first time there. And my teacher said, like, it's not a good place to go. Well, you know, I was there. The Arabs were very hospitable, nice, whatever. The taxi driver. These days, there's no way you're going to get in there. There's a lot more animosity now. There was a honeymoon that started after the 6-Day War and it ended with the first Intifada.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and end it with our prayer, and then we're gonna Right, let's see, Myra, where did she go?
She's in the room.
Are we supposed to have,
Chairs.
communion? Are we having communion now?
Shelby's in charge of that.
Shelby? You got communion ready?
Yeah, let me turn that off.
Yes. Yeah, no, leave it on, leave it on.
Anybody want my last one? This is the large print one I ran out of, I read out of. They're like 18-point font. So I take one of these.
Okay.
My hand's shaking. If I'm going on the edge here. I shake worse when I know it don't
You
need
said
to.
happy birthday and Hubert? I'm asking.
Yeah.
Think of it?
It's kind of
So
forget.
Yom Huladet is birthday.
What's funny though,
Well, Yom
it comes and
Huladet.
goes.
Yom
If I gotta do
Yom
something
Huladet
with
is
that,
birthday. I
still
don't know
miss
what they
it, gets
actually
worse.
say for happy birthday.
Weird.
Yom Huladet. All right, Yom Huladet.
Well, I have them all the
Yom
time,
is
but
day.
they're worse, sometimes.
No, or Huladet, you know, I think it's Huladet. Because there's a song, Yeshli Yom Huladet.
Oh, yeah, I can't, we didn't hear sing so
Yom
long.
Huladet. I don't know how they say it.
What about joy? Yeah, joy is.
Simcha. Well, Simcha is joy.
What is it?
Simcha.
Simcha.
Like Simchat is joy also. Simchat Torah.
Oh, Simchat.
Or
Simchat.
Simchat is joy also. That's the construct.
I got a guy hired on the yard line, so
Say
I used to hold the yard.
I don't know, I don't know how they actually say it.
You Huladet.
Yom Huladet. Yom is day.
Yom
Yom
Huladet.
Yeah, my-
Simchat
it
is
came
on.
from my
Well, I don't know, no,
grandmother from my
that would be happy birthday, that would be joy for birthday. I don't know what they actually say though. In other words, we say, okay, for Hanukkah, they say Chag Sameach, which means happy holiday. They don't say happy Hanukkah. They don't say
But I've always, I
like
remember shaking.
Hanukkah
my
Sameach
first
or
grade.
something
You
like
want
that.
me to have in there? Yep.
Chag is holiday, Sameach
Sameach.
is happy. So
Where's
for
that?
Hanukkah,
So if you
for
said
Hanukkah, you
Sameach,
say,
you Huladet.
well, I don't know what they say. What I'm saying is, we say
Like I
something,
said,
it's
part
not
of
always
it,
directly
I think just in your
translatable.
head.
We say
because
happy